The auctioneer's voice echoed through the grand ballroom, a sharp, rhythmic chant that grated on my nerves. Do I hear 1 million? $1 million for the centerpiece sculpture, a magnificent piece by a revolutionary artist. I barely looked at the twisted metal monstrosity on the stage. My eyes were fixed on her, Sarah, my ex-wife. She stood near a service door, holding a tray of empty champagne flutes, her waitress uniform looking a size too small. Her face was a mask of strained professionalism, but I could see the envy in her eyes as she scanned the wealthy patrons in their designer gowns and tailored suits. She hadn't seen me yet. I was seated at the main sponsors table right at the front. The bidding had stalled at $900,000. A hush fell over the room. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I raised my paddle almost lazily. 1 million, I said, my voice calm and clear, carrying easily in the sudden silence. Heads turned. The auctioneer's face lit up. $1 million from the gentleman at table 1! Sarah's head snapped in my direction. Her eyes widened, the tray in her hands trembling slightly. Recognition, then disbelief, then a flicker of something ugly. Resentment. She stared at me as if I were a ghost. The gavel slammed down. Sold! For $1 million to Mr. Alex Sterling. A polite ripple of applause went through the room. I didn't smile. I just kept my eyes locked on Sarah. She didn't know that the foundation I had just donated $1 million to was dedicated to mental health initiatives for entrepreneurs. It was a foundation I started, built with the profits from the very same business ideas she once called my pathetic little daydreams. She thought she had left a broken, depressed man with nothing but a failing mind. She had no idea she was witnessing the empire built from the ashes of the life she tried to destroy. You might be wondering why I would spend $1 million on an ugly sculpture, all for a fleeting moment of shock on a woman's face. To understand that, you have to go back to the day she packed her bags, looked at me with pure disgust, and told me my sadness was a burden she was no longer willing to carry. 5 years earlier, the world was gray. It wasn't a metaphor. My eyes literally seemed to have a filter on them, draining the color from our cramped apartment. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a drill in my skull. I was working from the sofa, which was also my bed most days, a laptop precariously balanced on my knees. I was trying to code, trying to bring the architectural software I'd designed to life. But the lines of code blurred, and my mind felt like it was wading through thick mud. I had been laid off from a high-stress architectural firm 6 months prior, a casualty of downsizing. The burnout had hollowed me out, leaving a clinical depression in its wake that felt like a physical weight on my chest. Sarah walked in, her heels clicking angrily on the cheap laminate flooring. She was dressed for another one of her networking happy hours. She glanced at me, then at the pizza box from the night before, and her lip curled in that familiar way. "Still here, I see," she said. It wasn't a question. "Are you ever going to get off that couch, Alex? My friends ask what my husband does, and I have to lie. I can't tell them he sits in the dark and mopes all day." I didn't have the energy to argue. "I'm working," I mumbled, gesturing to the laptop. "It's just slow going." She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Working on your little fantasy project? Alex, be real. My father was right about you. All talk, no action." She pulled her phone out. "Your brother Mark just closed a huge deal for his firm. Your mom called me to congratulate him. They're going to Bermuda to celebrate. What are we doing? We're sitting in this dump while you pretend to be the next Steve Jobs." The comparison to Mark was a knife she twisted often. He was the golden child, the successful son. I was the artistic, sensitive failure. "This isn't a fantasy, Sarah," I whispered. "It could work." She finally looked me in the eye, her own cold and hard. "I don't care if it could work. I can't do this anymore. I didn't sign up to be a nurse for a sad person. Your sadness is boring, Alex. It's a weight, and I'm done carrying it." She went into the bedroom and came out with a packed suitcase. It had been ready the whole time. I'm staying with my parents. My lawyer will be in touch. She didn't even say goodbye. She just walked out the door, leaving me in the gray silence, the weight on my chest suddenly 1,000 times heavier. Sarah's lawyer was as ruthless as she was. The papers arrived a week later. They weren't divorce papers. They were a declaration of war. Her father, a smug real estate developer named Mr. Miller, who always looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe, was orchestrating the whole thing. He called me once. "Listen, Alex," he'd said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "You're a good kid, just not cut out for the real world. Sarah needs a winner. Just sign the papers, don't make a fuss, and we can all move on. Don't try to fight for the assets. You didn't contribute to them anyway." Assets? We had about $10,000 in a joint savings account, money I had put in from my severance package. The rest was just cheap furniture in a rented apartment. But to him, it was about the principle of crushing me. When I called my own parents, hoping for a sliver of support, my mother's voice was cold. "Well, Alex, what did you expect? A woman like Sarah has needs. We saw this coming. Your brother Mark thinks you should just give her what she wants. It's the least you can do after letting her down." Mark called me later that day. There was no sympathy, only judgment. "You really did it this time," he said, a smug satisfaction in his tone. "You drove away a great girl because you couldn't get your act together. Dad and I had to smooth things over with Mr. Miller just so this doesn't get ugly for the family's reputation." My family wasn't worried about me. They were worried about how my failure reflected on them. The golden child had to clean up the scapegoat's mess. I didn't have the money for a lawyer or the strength to fight. I signed everything. They took the $10,000. Sarah's movers came and cleared out the apartment, taking the sofa, the bed, the television. They even took a bookshelf that my grandfather had made for me, claiming it was a marital asset. I was left with my clothes, my laptop, and the eviction notice on the door. I sat on the floor of the empty apartment, the silence ringing in my ears. I had no wife, no money, no family support, and no home. I was nothing. A ghost in the ruins of a life that was never really mine. Rock bottom wasn't a place, it was a state of being. And I was completely submerged in it. I spent 3 nights sleeping in my beat-up 2005 sedan. I'd park in a 24-hour supermarket lot, trying to recline the seat enough to stop the searing pain in my back. I felt invisible. People would walk past, their shopping carts rattling, and their eyes would slide right over me. I was just another piece of urban decay. During the day, I'd go to the public library, not to read, but to use the free Wi-Fi and pretend I had somewhere to be. I was scrolling through my phone's contacts one afternoon, about to delete the numbers of my family, when I saw a name I hadn't thought of in years. David. David was my college roommate, an engineering genius with a heart of gold. We'd lost touch after I married Sarah. She found him unambitious. On a whim, fueled by a desperation so deep it felt like I was drowning, I pressed the call button. I expected it to go to voicemail. He answered on the second ring. "Alex? Man, is that you? It's been years." I tried to sound normal, but my voice cracked. I told him I was in a bit of a jam. I didn't even have to finish. "Where are you?" he asked, his tone shifting from surprise to serious. "Just tell me where you are. I'm coming to get you." An hour later, I was sitting in David's clean, minimalist apartment. He put a plate of hot food in front of me and just let me talk. I told him everything: the layoff, the depression, Sarah leaving, my family's betrayal, the bookshelf. I expected him to offer pity or awkward advice. Instead, when I finished, he just shook his head. "Dude, they did a number on you," he said, his voice firm. "But that guy you're describing? The lazy, worthless failure? I lived with you for 4 years. That's not you." "They gave you that label and you started wearing it," His words didn't magically cure me, but they were a lifeline. It was the first time someone had seen me, the real me, in years. He let me crash on his couch, no questions asked. That night, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't worried about where I would sleep. I opened my old laptop, the one asset I had left. I looked at the lines of code for my architectural software. The project Sarah had called a pathetic little daydream. Staring at the screen in the quiet of David's apartment, it didn't feel like a daydream anymore. It felt like the only way out. I deleted the old stagnant lines and started typing. It was a small act of defiance, a single step on a 1,000-mile journey, but it was a start. David's couch became my command center. My life shrank to the 15-inch screen of my laptop. I coded until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped. The complex logic of the software was a refuge. While I was building intricate digital frameworks, I didn't have time to dwell on the wreckage of my past. Each bug I fixed, each feature I implemented, was a small piece of order I was imposing on a chaotic world. I was no longer Alex, the failed husband. I was the creator of Archimedes, the name I gave my program. It was a software designed to automate the most tedious parts of structural planning, a tool I dreamed of when I was working 80-hour weeks at the firm. David was my anchor to reality. He'd come home from his job and find me still in the same spot I was when he left. He'd put a sandwich next to me and say, "You need to eat, man." Or he'd drag me outside for a walk around the block, just to feel the sun on my skin. He never asked about the project's progress. He just provided the stable environment I needed to work. For months, it was just me and the code. I poured every ounce of my energy, my frustration, and my quiet, simmering anger into it. I finished a stable beta version after 6 months of relentless work. My savings from odd freelance coding gigs David found for me were almost gone. It was time to see if this thing was worth anything. I made a list of 100 small, independent architectural firms across the country. I drafted a cold email, explaining what Archimedes did, and offered a free 30-day trial. The first week, I got nothing but silence. The second week, I got 2 emails telling me to stop spamming them. The depression began to creep back in, the familiar voice whispering, "See? Sarah was right. It's a fantasy." Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, a reply landed in my inbox. It was from a woman named Elena, an architect in Oregon. "Your software is intriguing. I'll try it." For the next 30 days, I barely slept. She sent bug reports, feature suggestions, and questions. At the end of the trial, an email from her popped up. The subject line was simply, "Invoice." My heart hammered in my chest. She wrote, "Alex, this is brilliant. It saved me at least 20 hours of work this month. Send me an invoice for a 1-year license." I had no idea what to charge. I typed out a reply, my hands shaking. "The standard license is $500 for the year." I hit send, convinced she would laugh. 5 minutes later, a notification from PayPal appeared on my screen. "You've received $500 USD from Elena Vance." I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just money, it was proof. Proof that I could build something of value. It was the first stone laid in the foundation of my new life. Elena from Oregon became my unpaid marketing department. She raved about Archimedes in online forums for architects and mentioned it to colleagues in her professional network. Her testimonial was authentic and powerful. Within a month, I had 10 new clients. The next month, 30. Each $500 license felt like a victory, a repudiation of every negative word Sarah and our families had ever said. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building. I took every dollar and poured it back into the business, upgrading my servers, buying professional development tools, and hiring a freelance customer service rep to handle basic inquiries so I could focus on coding and sales. My daily routine was still grueling, but it was charged with purpose. The gray filter over the world had vanished, replaced by the sharp, clear focus of a man on a mission. 6 months after my first sale, Archimedes was generating over $20,000 a month. A year later, it was clearing 6 figures monthly. The growth was explosive. Architects were realizing that my software could save them a fortune in labor costs, and word was spreading like wildfire through the industry. The first thing I did when the income became stable was get my own place. I found a sleek, modern apartment in a new high-rise building with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was bright, airy, and smelled of fresh paint and possibility, the exact opposite of the dark, cramped space I'd shared with Sarah. I furnished it sparsely, valuing the open space. I bought a powerful new workstation, a monument to my new life, and finally retired the old laptop that had been my only companion in the darkness. I paid David back for his months of kindness, though he insisted I didn't have to. I made him take it. It was about my own self-respect. One afternoon, a major contract came through. It was from a highly respected firm in Chicago, a deal for 50 licenses that was worth more than my entire yearly salary at the job I was laid off from. It was a massive validation. As I reviewed the signed agreement, I noticed the firm's primary address. It was on the same exclusive tree-lined street as Mr. Miller's real estate office. A cold, quiet clarity washed over me. For 2 years, I had focused only on building. I had put my head down and worked, pushing the past away. But now, looking at that address, I realized I hadn't just built a company. I had built a weapon, and I was finally ready to start aiming it. Revenge, I learned, is not a fire. It's a blueprint. It requires planning, precision, and a deep understanding of the structures you intend to dismantle. My first target was Mr. Miller. He had been the architect of my humiliation, the smug voice of authority who declared me worthless. He dealt in property, in the tangible world of brick and steel. So that is where I would strike. I hired a private corporate intelligence firm, the kind that normally works for hedge funds, and directed them to build a complete profile of Miller real estate development. It didn't take them long to find the weak point. Mr. Miller had staked his company's entire future on a single, massive gentrification project called the Riverwalk. He'd already acquired most of a derelict industrial zone, but the Keystone property, a massive central warehouse, was still holding out. The owner, an elderly man tired of Mr. Miller's aggressive lowball tactics, was the only thing standing between him and the biggest deal of his life. I created a shell corporation, North Star Holdings, a deliberately bland and forgettable name. Then I had my lawyers approach the warehouse owner. I didn't try to negotiate. My offer was simple: double Mr. Miller's last offer, all cash, closing in 10 days. The old man, delighted to be rid of the property and to spite Mr. Miller in the process, accepted immediately. The deal was signed, sealed, and delivered before Mr. Miller's next scheduled meeting with him. I now owned the heart of his dream project. I didn't call him. I didn't send a note. I just sat back and waited. The intelligence firm monitored his communications. 2 weeks later, they sent me a transcript of a frantic call between Mr. Miller and his lawyer. He was apoplectic, demanding to know who had sniped the property. His lawyer gave him the company name, North Star Holdings. I could almost hear the gears turning in his arrogant mind. He would have assumed it was a rival developer. He would have spent days making calls, trying to figure out which competitor had outmaneuvered him. Finally, after hitting a wall, he would have done what I knew he would: pay a service to unmask the owner of the Shell Corp. I pictured him sitting in his polished mahogany office, the same one he'd probably called me from to lecture me on being a winner. I saw him leaning forward, staring at his computer screen as the report loaded. And then, the reveal. Not the name of a rival corporation, but a single familiar name listed as the sole owner: Alex Sterling. The boy he'd dismissed, the failure he'd helped kick out onto the street, now literally owned the ground beneath his feet. The real world, as it turned out, was a little more complicated than he thought. Mr. Miller's call came 3 days later. His voice, usually so smooth and confident, was tight with barely suppressed rage. Alex, I know what you did. What is this? Some kind of sick joke? You want money? Name your price. Let's get this over with. I leaned back in my chair in my spacious office, looking out at the city skyline. It's not a joke, Mr. Miller, I said, my tone placid. And I'm not interested in your money. I bought a piece of property. I believe that's how the real world works, isn't it? I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. You can't just sit on it. My project, my investors. That sounds like a you problem, I cut in, using the same dismissive tone he'd once used on me. I'm considering my options for the land, perhaps a new West Coast logistics hub for my company, or maybe a subsidized housing project for local artists. I'll let you know. I hung up before he could respond, leaving him with the knowledge that his legacy was now completely at my mercy. One down. Next was my brother Mark. My intelligence firm confirmed he was a vice president of portfolio management at a respectable but ultimately unremarkable investment firm. It was the perfect stage. I had my new chief financial officer, a seasoned pro I'd hired from a top tech company, arrange a meeting. The premise was simple. Archimedes Inc. was looking to place $50 million of its corporate treasury into a wealth management fund. An account of that size sent shockwaves through a firm like Mark's. We were instantly their most important potential client. My CFO insisted that all the department's VPs be present for the pitch. I walked into their glass-walled conference room 5 minutes late. The firm's senior partner stood up to greet me, and in the second row of chairs, looking self-important in his perfectly tailored suit, was Mark. His face went from a confident smile to chalk-white disbelief in a split second. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I gave him a small, cold nod and took my seat at the head of the table. They launched into their presentation, full of charts and jargon. Mark, trying to recover and impress his bosses, took the lead on a section about tech stock allocation. He was slick, but shallow. When he finished, I leaned forward. Your analysis of the semiconductor market is 6 months out of date, I said calmly. You've failed to account for the recent shift in fabrication sourcing, which puts 3 of your top 5 picks at significant risk. Did you read their latest quarterly reports? The senior partners turned to look at Mark, whose confident facade was crumbling. I wasn't done. For the next 20 minutes, I systematically and dispassionately dismantled their entire proposal, pointing out lazy research and flawed assumptions. I wasn't attacking. I was merely revealing the truth. Mark, the golden child, the winner, was just a mediocre salesman who had never been truly tested. And I was his final exam. When I finished speaking, a thick, uncomfortable silence hung in the conference room. Mark's face was ashen. His senior partner, a man with cold, calculating eyes, looked from me to Mark and back again. He cleared his throat. Mr. Sterling, please accept our sincerest apologies. This is embarrassing. Clearly, we were not as prepared as we should have been. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. I didn't look at my brother. I addressed the senior partner directly. Your firm came highly recommended, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. But I can't invest my company's capital based on a presentation a first-year analyst could pick apart. I require diligence, not just confidence. I let my eyes drift past Mark, as if he were part of the furniture. You have some serious performance issues to address in your team. With a final nod, I turned and walked out, leaving the wreckage behind me. I knew Mark wouldn't be fired immediately. That would look bad. They would just sideline him. His career trajectory, the one he'd been so smug about, was now a flat line. As expected, my mother called that night, her voice hysterical. What did you do, Alex? Mark is a mess. His boss put him on probation. After everything we've done for you, you repay us by trying to ruin your brother's life? The sheer audacity of her words struck me. Everything you've done for me? I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. You mean siding with my ex-wife? Telling me to sign away my savings? Standing by while her family stripped me of everything? That's what you've done for me. He's your brother, she shrieked. And I was your son, I said, the finality of the words hitting me as I said them. I didn't ruin Mark's life. I just exposed the truth. He was never as good as you all pretended he was. I was just the convenient excuse for his mediocrity. The family's scapegoat. Well, the scapegoat owns the flock now. Don't call me again. I ended the call and blocked her number. Then my father's. The final tie was severed. My weekly intelligence briefing arrived the next morning. It contained a small but satisfying update on Sarah. She and her new partner, a flashy salesman named Chad whom she'd started seeing before our divorce was even final, had recently downgraded. They'd moved out of their expensive downtown condo and into a generic suburban rental. Chad's tech bro startup had laid off half its staff, and he was among them. Her Instagram, once a curated feed of exotic cocktails and beach sunsets, had been silent for 2 months. The perfect, exciting life she had chosen was beginning to crumble. Her father's business was stalled, her allies were disgraced, and her winner was unemployed. She was on an island, and the tide was coming in. For months, I continued to build my company and, in parallel, my foundation. The Sterling Foundation became my real passion project. Funding mental health support for people who'd been chewed up and spit out by high-stress environments, just like I had. We became known for our large, impactful grants. It wasn't long before the invitations started pouring in from every charity organization in the state. One, in particular, caught my eye. It was for the annual Starlight Gala, the city's premier society event, the same one Sarah and her parents used to attend every year, posing for pictures to put in the society pages. This year, they were honoring new leaders in technology and philanthropy. They were honoring me. I was about to discard the invitation when my weekly intelligence report arrived. It was usually dry, corporate data, but one line item made me stop. Under personnel changes, it noted that the exclusive catering company that had handled the Starlight Gala for the last decade had recently hired a new part-time waitress, Sarah Miller. She was trying to supplement their income while Chad was between opportunities. The irony was staggering. The universe wasn't just offering me a stage, it was providing the entire cast. I immediately RSVP'd. Yes, I would be delighted to attend. And yes, my foundation would be making a significant contribution. On the night of the gala, I felt a profound sense of calm as I put on my custom-tailored tuxedo. There was no rage left in me, no bitterness. There was only a cold, clear sense of purpose. I was not going there to yell or to cause a scene. I was going there to be seen. I was going to be a living, breathing testament to the fact that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The ballroom was exactly as ostentatious as I remembered from the pictures Sarah used to show me. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, and the clinking of glasses mixed with the low hum of powerful conversations. I found my table, table 1, right at the front, and saw her almost immediately. She was standing by a service station, her back straight, her smile plastered on. But I could see the exhaustion in her posture and the faint lines of stress around her eyes. This wasn't the life she had envisioned. Then the charity auction began. I paid little attention until the final item, the ugly metal sculpture, was presented. The bidding climbed, fueled by ego and champagne. When it stalled at 900,000, I knew it was time. I picked up my paddle. 1 million, I said. The words dropped into the silent room like stones into a still pond. And as the auctioneer's voice boomed my name, her head snapped towards me. Our eyes met across the glittering room. Her face, a canvas of shock and dawning horror, was the only masterpiece I was interested in that night. The past and the present collided in that one, silent moment, and she finally understood. She hadn't just divorced a man. She had disinvested from a sure thing. During the intermission, while people mingled and congratulated me, I felt her eyes on me constantly. I needed a moment away from the glad-handing and fake smiles. I stepped out onto a deserted stone terrace that overlooked the manicured gardens. The cool night air was a relief. As I predicted, a few moments later, the door opened and she stepped out, holding an empty tray as a prop. She was shaking. She spoke first, her voice barely a whisper. "Alex, what? How?" I turned to face her fully, my expression unreadable. "They're honoring me tonight, Sarah, for my company and my foundation." I paused, then delivered the counter question, my voice soft but sharp as glass. "What are you doing here?" Her face flushed with shame. We needed the money. Chad lost his job." "Ah, Chad," I said, nodding slowly. "The winner. I remember." I took a step closer, forcing her to look at me. "The last time we had a real conversation, you were in a hurry to leave? You told me my sadness was boring you. You said I was a weight you were done carrying. Do you remember?" She flinched, nodding mutely, tears welling in her eyes. "Well, you were right. It was a weight," I continued, my voice still unnervingly calm. "But the moment you left, the weight was gone. It was you. You, your father, my brother, all of you. You were the anchors holding me down. The moment you cut the rope, I started to float." I gestured back towards the grand ballroom. "This life, the one you see in there, this is the life I built while you were living the one you chose. The pathetic little daydream I was working on? It's called Archimedes. It's projected to be worth 9 figures by next year. The foundation I donated to tonight? I started it. It helps people recover from the kind of darkness you find so inconvenient." "I made a mistake," she finally choked out, the tears streaming down her face now. "Alex, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, not even satisfaction. Just a void. The final piece of my revenge wasn't to hurt her, it was to feel nothing at all. "No," I said simply. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You revealed who you are, and I should thank you for that. You were the catalyst for everything I have today. Your betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me." I checked my watch. I should get back inside. I'm told the dessert is excellent. I turned and walked back into the light of the gala, leaving her alone in the darkness of the terrace with the ruins of her choices. The days following the gala were quiet on my end. I instructed my staff to field all calls. The world, however, was buzzing. Society columns whispered about the dramatic fall of the Miller family and the meteoric rise of the man they had cast out. My story became a sort of local legend in business circles, the scorned husband who built an empire from the ashes of his divorce. The public nature of their downfall was a punishment more potent than any private revenge. My CFO informed me that Mr. Miller, having failed to get through to me personally, had sent a formal, desperate proposal to acquire the warehouse property at a ridiculously inflated price. I had my assistant send a one-line reply. "Mr. Sterling respectfully declines." That was the final nail in his coffin. With his financing collapsing and no way to complete his project, he was forced to sell his company's assets to a larger competitor for a fraction of their worth. He lost everything. My brother Mark quietly resigned from his firm a few weeks later. His public humiliation made him toxic. The last I heard, he was selling insurance in a different state, the golden child's shine permanently extinguished.